Hello everybody, Protobro here, infamous brother to Mechabro. I'm going to provide you a series of tutorials on how to play Civil War 2. Why? Because the game is complicated as hell, and the manual is severely lacking in a lot of the intricacies of the game, a lot of the internal game mechanics and kind of how things resolve. I pretty much found myself having to go to the AGEOD Civil War 2 forums pretty frequently to get a lot of my questions answered. So my hope is I can take a lot of that information that I learned from those forums, put them into these videos to better assist you in playing this game if you decide you want to. So let me disclaim two things. One, it's 2017 when I'm doing these videos. This game came out in like 2013 or 2014. So I don't know how much applicability this is going to even have to people in the cybersphere. I'm hoping that people will come across these videos and be like, hey, this is a cool game, let me try it out. But I have no idea, so this may not be helpful to anybody because nobody may be playing this game. Disclaimer number two, most of the information I'm going to be providing you in these videos is not stuff I came up with myself. It's stuff that I learned either from the manual or through the forums, which there's a considerable amount of information on there. I highly encourage you to go to the forums anytime you have a question about what does what in the game. But I'm hoping that these tutorials will answer a lot of your questions about the game and help you get started, because I found it to be a pretty heavy lift playing this game from the start. And then only after significant hours and a lot of really commitment, being like, damn it, I'm going to figure out how to play this game, did I really figure it out. Now I'm having a lot of fun. It's definitely worth it, but it's a lot of heartache and hair pulling to start. And I didn't find a whole lot of help on YouTube or other videos, so hopefully this will help. Let's start with options under game. So first, Fog of War is pretty self-explanatory, but Battle Planner. What is Battle Planner? So I have it turned off because I like to play from the perspective of the president or the commander-in-chief, where, you know, Lincoln wasn't on the battlefield telling McClellan or McDowell or Hooker or whoever the general might have been, hey, here's how I want you to put out your lay of battle. In fact, there's a anecdote, I forget where I read it, but where Lincoln mentions to Grant in terms of their preparation for the invasion of Virginia, hey, what if you went this way? I always thought this would be a smart route to take an army. And Grant makes note, I think it might have been from his memoirs, but he basically says that, yeah, if I had done what Lincoln had suggested, I would have split my army in two, completely exposed my flank, and gotten decimated. So, point being, the commander-in-chief is usually not the one calling the shots on the battlefield, so I have this turned off. However, if you would like to micromanage your game more thoroughly, by turning this on, major battles, what will happen is you'll have the option to dictate each round the line of battle, whatever that might be. So you can basically put it so that you do kind of a defensive stance, and then once attacked, you counterattack aggressively. You can do it where you load up a flank and try and hit the flank. You can do it where you're really in this kind of defensive reserve mode, so you have lots of units stacked deep, but not an aggressive stance. That's what Battle Planner does. So turning that on allows you to have that kind of micromanaging for the particular battles. Traffic penalty, what does that do? I currently have it set to, I don't know if that's medium, I guess it's kind of like low. Basically what it means is that if you're sending troops through a region, which is a parcel of land that's been demarcated by the black areas, the larger your army, the slower it may move because they're all using the same road. So the higher this penalty, theoretically, the more cohesion your army will suffer, which I'll explain in the next video. The slower they'll move. They may just totally get bottled up and not move at all. So moving this around affects that. I think it's still a little buggy. I want to say I have it set on this level here, which is probably low. And I haven't noticed too much adverse effect from this. It seems to be working out pretty well. But if you want to add some realism to your game, traffic penalty is definitely one way to do it. Easy supply. So what that means is that you can have the game automate supply, which is pushing supplies, whether it's food or ammunition, up to the front lines, or you can do it manually. Supply is one of the major things in this game that I think makes a huge difference on really the success or failure of your country. I will be doing a whole separate video on supply, but just be aware that you can, in the game menu, turn that on or off. Extended pool, this basically means that you are playing with historical allowances and recruitable military units. You can basically move this around. I don't play around with this at all. I just play with historical. It just basically means that it gives you, I guess, new units that you wouldn't have historically gotten. Naval boxes, this basically deals with the boxes you'll see on the overlay later on in this video with where shipping comes in and out of, as well as the blockade. So you can basically make this as micro or macro managed as you want. Randomized generals is just what you say. Basically, Stonewall may be really crappy if you do randomized generals, or if you have it turned off like I do, then all the generals that come in are going to be historically accurate with regards to their prowess on the battlefield, so to speak. Activation rule. Now, this is an important aspect to the game. I have it currently set on veteran, but what this means is that there's 14 days in a turn, and it's divided by 2 weeks. And I believe that the first 7 days, your commander may get an activation. So there's an activation roll. There's some sort of algorithm that goes in. It's kind of like a roll of the dice. And it's based around your commander's strategy level, which I'll explain later. But what you need to know for this activation roll thing here is basically if your commander does not get the roll that he needs to quote-unquote activate, then he won't follow the orders that you gave him because he won't be able to do anything. You can basically turn this off so that basically they will always do what you tell them, or you can do like I do with veteran, where you really have no idea. I could tell him, hey, I want you to move to the front line. He's going to be there in 7 days. And he ends up not doing anything at all, and then that leads to whatever consequence that may be. So you can kind of do it any way you want. Notice here, if selected land forces will have a large movement in combat penalty if the stack commander is not activated. So there's different ways you can play around with this. Just bear in mind that depending on where you put it, there's different consequences for it. And the nice thing is when you hover over it, it'll give you some drop down on what that does. Oh, and I forgot to hit delay commitment. This basically, delayed commitment means that this is the delay that your forces and the other forces may have before they start shooting at each other. I like to have it right here because I feel like the small delay tends to replicate the way things actually happen in the Civil War. You might have the pickets shooting at each other, but forces didn't really go after each other, right? They kind of usually went up the chain of command and said, hey, can I engage? Or should I engage? They kind of assessed things first before diving right in. So I have that at small delay, but you can do it all the way up to long delay, where there's a huge delay before they get fighting, medium, all that sort of thing. It's really a matter of preference. So just be aware that that's there. And then historical attrition. This just has to do with attrition on the battlefield or when they're away from supply. So notice here, this means that non-moving player troops will lose men from desertion and sickness every turn. Or what you can do is historical, and so forth. All right, AI really quick, and then we'll get to the overlay of the field. Aggressiveness basically dictates how aggressive the AI is. Detection bonus is basically the fog of war. Do you want to give them a kind of a cheat, so to speak, so they can see a little bit more than you could in the fog of war? You can up this, down this, however you want. Ranking, obviously, is how difficult is the AI going to be. Use all behaviors. So some AI behaviors will be disabled, so I have it on, by the way. But higher turn processing speed, recommend to check this box, blah, 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 blah. So, and then activation bonus. This is the other side of the coin from here with you. Your activation rule, the AI gets a bonus. So I gave him a bonus, which means that he's less likely to get frozen in time and not do what he wants to do. I just do that because one of the things we have, one of the settings I have here recommends giving it a +1 just to balance things out. So that's why I did it. So that's AI. and then game, and so forth. All right, so let's go look at the battlefield. I want to give you a brief overview of the overlay for the game. Okay, so zooming out here, let's zoom out. Let me just let you see just how crazy this map is. Look at all those flags and troops. I mean, this is where the game can get really overwhelming. And so hopefully these tutorials will make it a little less overwhelming, kind of give you an idea how to subdivide things and so forth. So first I'm going to go over the hotkeys with you, 1 through 9. So 1 through 9 is going to be your overlays for the actual map. So currently we have no overlays setted. If you go down here to this little global thing and pop that out, these are all your 1 through 9s, or 1 through 8, sorry. So these are all the 1 through 8s. You can manually click them, or you can do what I do, which is I use the hotkeys. So let's go with starting with number 1. Number 1 and 2 are the ones I use most frequently. This is your military control. Okay, so military control is really important. So please listen to me and hear me out on this. It'll go a long way in helping you develop strategy. Notice the dark blue. This is going to be when you hover over it. Notice it says military control, United States 100%. That basically means that if we as the Confederacy move into, say, let's see, moved into here, Allegheny, Maryland, then what would happen is that we'd go into an immediate offensive stance. Now, you don't need to know what that means for this video, but just bear in mind that military control is very important. I'm going to do a separate video on military control so that you understand what it means. But that's number 1, and when you push number 1, you have this overlay, and then you can kind of hover over each region, and it'll tell you the military control. So here in Warren, Virginia, we have 100% Confederate States of America military control here, and so forth. So that's number 1, is your military control. Number 2, which is another hotkey that I use very frequently, is your supply. Again, I'm going to do a separate video for supply. But just bear in mind that number 2 is supply. Again, they're all right here, so you can pop them in and out. No overlay, military control, supply. These flashing numbers are going to be your supply depots. And then if you notice here along the side here, you have your supply in each area. So Fredericksburg is a supply depot, and they have ammunition and supply. So all you need to know for this video is that number 2 is your supply overlay. It'll show you your area of supply. Notice here we're not going to be really getting any supply in these areas until we get a little bit of military control in those areas. And then the flashing points are going to be your depots, and that's really what, for the most part, you're going to be using number 2 for. So if I use the mini map down here in the bottom left, which is very helpful, and you notice here we have all of our gray and blue, and I'll tell you in a moment how to kind of filter those out. But if we go to our central theater over here, notice I don't have anything flashing up here, but I have troops up here. That's not good. That means the closest supply depot is way down here. We have supply traveling up the river, but not as much as we would like. So one way to push supply up is to build a supply depot. And the way for me to know whether they're getting supplied or not is to take that overlay off, put the supply overlay on, and be like, oh, they're not getting supply up there. I need to remedy that situation. All right, so that's number 2, that's supply. Number 3 is going to be your victory points, basically. It's going to be your strategic towns, all right? So morale, which is up here, 112, morale is directly affected by the number of strategic towns that you control and for the length of time that you control them. So if you click strategic towns, number 3, it'll show you the strategic towns, and that'll give you some idea of your strategy. So if you notice over here, we have Price over here up in Springfield. Part of the reason I have him in Springfield is because this is a strategic town. So I have decided that I want my line of defense to extend up to here because it is a strategic town and I do not want to lose it, because the longer I have it, the more victory points I get, which I'll show you in a moment, as well as morale. Morale is affected by that. The way to win the game is morale. If you either you basically make your enemies morale plummet to a certain point, you win the game, or the other way is to get to 1866 and have more victory points than the other side But just what you need to know is that morale is very important, and one of the ways to keep morale up is to have as many victory or strategic towns as possible. So that's number 3. Number 4 is going to be your allegiances. So this is going to kind of tell you, hey, who's loyal to the Confederacy and who's loyal to the Union. Loyalty affects supply. So again, separate video, just know that the loyalty tab will tell you supply. That's important, right? Because if you look at our supply, we have here, here, and here. But our loyalty, it's kind of close. 55 Confederate, 45 Union. That means the supply coming out of Fort Smith is going to be a little bit hindered because we got some Unionists here who may be not all forthcoming and helpful in making sure the supply gets pushed up to Springfield. So just bear in mind that loyalty is going to be your number 4. All right, and when you do that, that's going to give you an overlay of your loyalty. Number 5 is just your states. I don't use this a whole lot, but it does kind of give you an idea, geography. Hey, what state's which? This is important for the recruitment tab, which I'll discuss in another video on troops that you can recruit. Because back in those days, troops were primarily recruited from the states they originated from. So the Confederacy would put a call out for volunteers, and then Arkansas would raise their volunteers, Missouri would raise theirs, and then notably, you could only place those volunteer units in those states to start until they were mobilized and ready to go. So if you're not quite sure where, okay, I can recruit some Missouri troops, where can I place them? You hit 5 and say, oh, okay, here's Missouri. Then you can look in, and it's probably going to be Jefferson City or Springfield, and those are probably the 2 main places you'd be putting troops. Or maybe Poplar Bluff or something like that. Right, so theaters of operation. I never use this tab. I create my own theaters of operation. But I guess if you wanted to use the recruitment tab, which I'll discuss later, does kind of help you sort between Deep West, Mid-Atlantic, Far West. I believe those are all divvied up based on the theaters, but otherwise I don't use the theaters tab at all. Now this is very helpful, by the way. So this is the weathers tab. So say I've got price and I want to go attack this homeboy here, Sumner, right? Before I do that, I may want to see what the weather is like before I do it, along with what the terrain is like. Pressing 7 along with 8 is going to give me my kind of advanced notice of what to expect when I go into Carthage, Missouri. So this is your terrain is number 7, and then number 8 is going to be your weather. So what's cool is if you take off the 7 key, right, you don't really get a whole lot of information here because right now we have no overlay. We have loyalty, we have military control, and that's it. And then that says clear weather, right? But if we hit 7, now all of a sudden we get the offensive, defensive ratings for troops engaged in this particular region, the max range, the frontage widths. Again, I'll discuss all these in a separate video. Just be aware that you can get a lot of really detailed, helpful information using tab 7, otherwise known as the terrains modifier. That'll tell you a lot that you need to know about that region before you go in and do a lot of fighting, okay? And then 8's your weather. Again, this is just kind of a massive overview for weather. You can kind of zoom out, get an idea of what things are like. Pretty helpful for the spring months when there's a lot of rain, or the winter months when there's a lot of sleet and snow and frozen weather. So that's number 8. Okay, so that's your 1 through 8 keys. Now I'm going to go through your F keys. That has to deal with your basically your political government decisions. So think of it this way. Your 1 through 8 is your overlay of the map in front of you. And then your F keys are going to be you're the president, you have your cabinet, and you're going to be making your day-to-day decisions. Okay, that's going to be your F keys. So let's start with F1. F1 is your list of forces. I don't use this a whole lot because I just feel like it's hard to kind of filter through. But you can certainly use this. It's one way to look at your overview map. So basically if you said, hey man, pull me up the global roster for all of our military forces in the Confederacy, this would give you everything. And then you can sort it through looking at just your naval forces by hiding all land forces, looking at just your land forces by hiding your fleet forces, and so forth. There's various tabs here. I'm not going to go through them because they're all pretty self-explanatory for you. But notice when you hover over, it'll give you the information. But that's F1, okay? And then, by the way, all these F keys are just down here as well. So one thing I like about this game, even though it's a big dive, is that when you hover over, it'll tell you, hey, by the way, the hotkey for forces is F1. Let me hide that, by the way. And so forth. So just bear that in mind, okay? F2 is a key that I use every turn. This is going to be a recruitment key, recruitment tab. This is a tab you're probably going to be looking at every single turn. I'm not going to go into detail on this in this video. I just want you to know that it is here. F2, it's your war production tab. It's going to show the units that are being produced currently, new units that are being produced, and then these are your reserves. All right, so when I go into how to recruit units and how to kind of repair them or bring them up to full strength, I'll explain that further. Just know this F2 war production. This is going to be historical events. So for Department of War, these will pop up randomly throughout the game. And sometimes in this menu tab down the bottom right, which we're going to cover next, it may give you a hint that there's something new here. You just kind of watch out for it because it won't necessarily pop out at you and tell you, but just be aware that from time to time, the Department of War will have new options available to it. For example, I want to say the Union in the first turn has under Department of War the opportunity to impose a blockade. That's one of the things here. You, as President Lincoln, can make that decision. So under F4 is the Department of Treasury. And just as, Lincoln could choose to do the blockade, Lincoln could have options in the Department of Treasury. Again, we're the Confederacy, so here are our options as President Jefferson. So Jefferson can raise taxes. We can recommend raising taxes to the Congress. We can print paper. We can move the capital to Atlanta, or we can issue war bonds. And the nice thing is when you hover over it, it'll tell you the consequences for it. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on these because they're self-explanatory. If you're curious about the ramifications to do printing paper, for example, you're not quite sure what it means to say 4% price variation, go on the forums, see what people say. I just basically say, hey, 4% price variation. That basically means that everything I do is going to cost 4% more. Is it worth it? And just, that's just I think a judgment decision. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer on that. I like to do war bonds because it's only a 1% price variation and you get $600,000 out of it. You do lose 25 victory points, which I'll discuss in a moment, but it's not as significant as the price variation. So, just know that hover over it, that those are options there, and be aware that every turn there may be new options available to you. I want to say this is a new one for me. I'm in August, and this I think you get to do every 6 months. All right, so interior is just what it is, Department of Interior. These are different things you can do for the interior of your country. As you can see here, we can build arsenals, ironworks. I did not know this, so keep this in mind. There's a little arrow down here. You can scroll, and it'll give you more options sometimes. I'm currently building ironworks, so if I don't have any more options left, but sometimes you see here, say 6 of 6. It might say 6 of 7. That means there's something else down here, so just be aware there's some arrows down there kind of hidden away. But if you hover over, it'll tell you the cost and what it does and all that stuff. Then Department of State, again, hey, Department of State, what are some things you can do? These are the different options. Be aware those are options. These are all your F keys again. And then F7, I use this pretty frequently, actually. Instead of using F1, I use F7. I use this basically for what F1 I think was intended to do. Although, with F1, it does give you some of the breakdown for the different units. But for F7, this is going to be your mini-map blown up, okay? And the way I use this is I take all my fixed units, which are units you can't move. They just randomly populate in like forts and stuff, and they're there to defend your forts. I turn them off. So hide stacks made only of locked fixed units. So you do that. That now shows you all the different units that can actually move. That you can tell them to go somewhere. So that's one good way, at least early in the game, to say, hey, where are the units that I need to move? Do that and it'll show it. The bigger the square, the bigger the unit. So as you can see, the Virginia, we've got the big units over here. Then when you hover over it, it'll tell you who it is. So that's an army. That's an army. Army of the Potomac, an army of the Shenandoah. And then it tells you who's in that. So just bear in mind that one way to kind of sort out your country's units is to go to F7, hide the fixed units, and then you can kind of hover over, figure out who's who, click on them. Notice I clicked on it and it took me to this guy. So that's pretty cool. So again, I went F7, clicked a unit, and then boom, here's this guy. I can actually move him if I wanted to. Your triangle units are going to be your fleets. So I have a fleet in the Gulf, but then I also have a fleet up here, and I'm like, what's he doing? He's just kind of hanging out. I'm like, I may want to like move him, possibly. And then again, the bigger the triangles, the bigger the units. So here, you know, we click over here and we've got some ironclads that are ready to go. And we got some other units. But again, if you hover over it, it'll tell you who is there. Okay, so that's F7. You can do the same thing for the Union. These are all this isn't all the Union troops. These are just the ones we know about from the Confederacy side. Notice I've got a guy way down here. I didn't even know this guy was down here. But he's apparently here now. I don't know how long he's been there, but doing a tutorial else and discover I have troops that I didn't know I had. Who knew? But that's F7, and again, you can kind of hide all these things and do that to kind of sort out your army. F8's basically your F1, but for your regions. So just be aware here that these are all my regions. And notice here, for some reason, I can see the American region. This might be like all the regions in the game, but you can again sort through using these different tabs here. That's F8. F9 is going to be your objectives, and it's also going to tell you the casualties that you've taken. So we're in August of 1861. We've suffered 6,500 casualties. That's whether prisoners taken, deaths, or injury. It'll also give you the foreign intervention and morale. So Union is morale's at 93. Ours is at 112, but in order to win the game, it'll tell you all the different things. So let's see here. Where does it say? Whoops, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Objectives. So these are the objectives. So we obviously want to hold Richmond because that's worth 50 victory points. DC is also worth 50 victory points, which the number of victory points that you get directly impacts the morale of the other side. Currently, the Union has 754 victory points. We have 911, so we're doing better than he is currently. But his morale is 93, and in order to win, we need either 200 morale, or we need to, in order to lose, fall under 25. Now, the Union, I think, if their morale falls down to like 50 or something like that, then they lose. But it's not entirely clear from this perspective. But just know that F8 will tell you how many victory points you're getting, what you need to win, all that sort of thing. Scenario backgrounds F10, depending on the scenario you play. That'll give you more info on that. And then F12, well then F11 and 12. So I don't do that because my F12 is set for photos or something, I don't know. So I just click up here. This is your F12. This is your overall regional decision making. So what does that mean? You get these cards that you can play. Just think of it like Pokemon, for those of you who are Pokemon fans, or Magic the Gathering, or, you know, what's the Blizzard one that just came out that's a card game, whatever, right? You can play these cards to basically boost things in your particular region, or undermine your enemy, or whatever you might want to do. So for example, our build defensive works, it'll flash green on where we can put those. Notice Manassas Junction there, we've got 831 power of troops there. That's a good place to put down a defensive work, but we only have one that we can use. So you just click it and drag it and move it over and put it wherever you want to go. Okay. Depending on, you just go over these, hover over the one that you want to use, and it'll tell you where you can put it. Notice plunder, for example, we can plunder up here. and it'll tell you what plunder does. It gives you $35,000, but it costs loyalty, military control, victory points, blah, 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 blah. So you probably only want to plunder somewhere where you're going to get a lot of riches out of it. And then, just hover over this and it'll tell you what it does and where you can put it. So demonstration, for example, notice the areas that are highlighted there. Let me zoom out so you can kind of see. So a lot of different places we can demonstrate, but not a lot of places we can build a road. Looks like we can build a road right there if you see it flashing, or down in there. And it'll tell you what the road does, right? This says road built, 10% loyalty, 3% or 3 victory points gained, helps movement speed and supply transfer, right? So that is F12, which again I don't use. And by the way, these arrows, depending on if you have more, if I had more cards over here, I could click this over and it'll show me they're hidden there. I say that because when I first started playing, I didn't realize I could scroll and get more stuff. But I always just click the card here, which is your F12. Okay. Your national morale is so actually, while we're going into this, we're going to cover the top area here really quick. Okay, so this is your F11, which is going to be your recruitment tab. This is that tab I was referring to earlier, where you can only recruit troops in the state that they originate from. So see how we have Missouri here? If we went over to Missouri, those are the only places we can build this unit at, those 3 green areas. So again, if you weren't quite sure, one way you could do it is hit number 5 and get rid of 11, and then it'll tell you where it's all at. And that's the one thing, by the way, to note. Your overlay will be hidden by your national decision tab. So when I hit F11 for military purchase dudes, my overlay is hidden, and now it'll just tell me where I can build these. Okay, so that's F11. I'm going to cover this in more detail in another video, so don't worry about it right now. Just know that it's out there. It's this gear thing, or it's F11. Your national regional decision-making cards are F12. They're up here, your card thing. Okay. Here's your strategic atlas. Again, we've already covered that. That's these up here. Your morale up here. It'll give you information. It's a really important number to keep track of every single turn. These little kind of hidden flags here that I actually never noticed were there to be when I first started playing the game. These are your armies that are on, that are in your country. So you click it, it'll take you to Beauregard. Click it, take you to Johnson. But I think to start, I can have 3 armies, so I might have 3 of these flags anywhere anywhere in the map. So the third one might be a Western army, and so I click that, it would take me over to the West. Okay. These up here really quick. So up here is your victory points. We have 911, and we're getting 53 a turn. So again, if you hover it over, it'll just tell you information about that. Victory points are just one way to assess whether you're going to win the game. So, if the game ends and you have more victory points than your opponent, then you win the game. Some decisions require victory points, so you need victory points to basically spend things on regional decisions or to get money. And also victory points affect your morale. So the less victory points you have, the less morale you may have. The next thing is your cash. Then you have your conscripts. That's basically the number of the pool of available recruits that you can put into new units or rebuild old units. And then your war supplies, which are very important. That's basically all of your war crap, for lack of a better way to say it, that is required to build something, whether it's a new ironwork, arsenal, artillery battery, cavalry unit, ship, whatever, railroad system. Different things require a little bit more, a little bit less of money, conscripts, war supplies, but usually all 3 are involved, usually. And depending on whether it's going to be an infantry unit, artillery, ship, or whatever, might say, hey, more war supply or less or whatever. But just bear in mind that war supply is very important. There's different ways to get it, which I'll cover in another video. And then these things in red, this is your rail points and your river points. Highly important, by the way. Very, very important. Keep tabs on this. Keep this as high as you can because it takes forever to march troops on foot. And so you're going to want your rail system and your river system to transport your armies. And so once this number is depleted in this term, you can't move anybody else by rail. You're going to have to either readjust and maybe cancel a rail movement for somebody to give it to somebody else, or maybe you can't move that unit by rail because you don't have enough rail points. So you want to keep this number up as much as you can. 147 is pretty good. We could probably move both of our armies, which are fairly large, with the 147 rail points. And that's only because I've invested a lot of money into my rail system over the past few months. As you can see, our river points is much lower, but this basically says, hey, instead of traversing the swamps of Mississippi, you can ride river transports up the Mississippi. That's what this number depicts. And then this is for an entry level. The higher this is, the more likely that Britain or France is going to enter the war on the Confederacy side. From what I hear and understand, it's almost impossible to accomplish, but hey, why not strive for it? So that's this up here. And then last but not least, let me just cover really quick here this mini map down here, and then these comment message area here. So Fredericksburg, let's just click Fredericksburg. Notice here when we click Fredericksburg, we hover over it. Notice on the left side, right above the mini map, it says 67 and 886. That's a very quick way for you to find out what is on number 2, which is supply overlay. How much ammunition and supplies is in Fredericksburg? We have 67, tons worth of ammunition and 886 tons of supply. And that just tells you, okay, that's so much supply and ammunition there, and that basically means we can hoard up a bunch of troops here, get them resupplied, move them up. Or that means we have that much supply, it's going to be pressed forward to Manassas or up to Harper's Ferry or whomever needs it. All right, now bottom right side here, really quick. What will happen from time to time is you'll have major messages pop up. So here, you click that and it'll pop that up there. Or if you click the cross daggers, what it'll do is it'll show you different battles that had actually happened and during that turn. So you notice when I click that, it pulled up here, General Griffin, and then no commanding general, and it gives you an overlay. That's one way to kind of find out the different battles that happened. But then if you look at the other features that are down here, you have your message tab, which is just a scripted events tab that'll tell you just various random messages that happened. But if you hit the cross daggers tab here, this will tell you the different battles that occurred throughout the turn that you just had. The boots tab will tell you all the different movements, basically why someone didn't get where they were supposed to go or where they arrived where they were supposed to go, and then also give you some information on your enemy movements. You click the multiple soldiers tab here, it'll tell you the different troops that were basically conscripted or built that turn. The chain over the, Florida thing, I don't know, will tell you the different things that were captured or lost in the last turn. And you notice here it says, while taking Tallahassee, we managed to capture 49 supply carts and 8 crates of ammunition. So that basically tells you the different places that you took. And then finally, the shovels tab will tell you different things that you've constructed in the last turn. But most notably, bear in mind that when you click these different things, you can click next to the boot, for example, here, and it will take you to that particular area. So if we click the battle tab and we go to Campbell engaged the United States in the region of Farnham, Kansas City, and we click the sword, it'll take you right to that area where you can see where that took place. So with that, that is the overlay for the game, and in the next video, I'm going to show you how to actually recruit troops and put together an army. Okay, 2 additional points I wanted to make before I conclude this video that I kind of skipped over in the previous portion of this video. First, with regards to victory points, you can also accumulate victory points by destroying the enemy units or winning major battles. So that's important to note. Victory points aren't just holding on strategic locations or losing them. It's also winning major battles, destroying enemy units, that sort of thing. Minor skirmishes, you're not going to get victory points, but for major battles, you almost certainly will gain some or lose some depending on how things go. And notice if you hover over it, it'll show you kind of how how I'm getting 53 a turn. So changes from options and events -25. That basically means that that event card I was showing you, those cards you can play, playing these cost victory points, and so you may lose some doing that. So that's the first point I wanted to hit. The second point is national morale. Again, you can gain or lose national morale based on how a battle goes. So what'll happen is down here in the bottom right with these crossed sabers icon, notice here, let's see if we had any battles this turn. Here we go. Okay, so we lost the Battle of the United States in Region Hermitage, Missouri at day 8, and 0 national morale points were lost. So it'll tell you whether you lost any national morale points. As you can see here, this was the battle. Again, just a minor skirmish. So you're not gonna lose any national morale or gain any from winning a little battle like this. Nobody in the Confederacy could care less about that. But a major battle like Shiloh or Manassas or something, you may gain or lose some national morale points and or some victory points, depending on how things go. So I just wanted to cover those last 2 points before I conclude this video. Thank you.